Hello. Okay, welcome back. We are going to be this time in this lecture talking about chapter 5. Chapter 5 is a very short chapter and it goes over two main things, both of those being critical thinking and then creative thinking. And both are very necessary tools for you to have in college. Obviously critical thinking because you need to be able to make decisions about things and analyze what it is that you're thinking about, especially for, let's say, if you're writing papers and you're trying to make an argument about something and maybe you're trying to convince someone of something in a paper that you're writing. You need to be able to have good critical thinking skills. And let's face it, sometimes not everyone does. A lot of times we get caught up with our assumptions and the way that we think about things, and we don't really take a step back and think critically about it. And it's a very, very valuable tool that we need to have in the academic setting. And then thinking about creative thinking, that's also something that is very valuable in not only the college setting, but creative thinking is a great thing to try to embrace and increase our skill at for many things in life, because a lot of times when you have certain problems, things like that, creative thinking can sometimes get you out of those kind of situations because it makes you think outside the box. And a lot of people are really, really uncomfortable with creative thinking. They feel like they don't have the ability to think creatively and really think outside the box. They usually kind of follow certain sets of rules and they're not comfortable with being a creative thinker. But what most people don't realize is that in many ways they are creative. They just don't know it and they don't realize it. And so this chapter is just kind of going over these topics to help you hone in on the skills for critical and creative thinking. And I do apologize for the way I look. All of us are kind of, self-isolated in quarantine. And so me, myself as well, I've given up on wearing makeup and doing whatever because I don't go anywhere. So sorry that I look like a mess, but here we go. Anyway, so going through the chapter, it starts on page 120 and it's first talking about critical thinking. Most of the reading, it's real quick. It's a short chapter, but you do need to know the difference in how the book defines critical thinking and then creative thinking. So as you're reading, you're going to come across the way that it's defined. Make sure you understand that. And then mainly for the critical thinking section, you're going to see starting on page 122, it's going to be called the 4-part model of critical thinking. And they put it as kind of like a visual where you're going to see a pyramid structure. And it's basically going from different levels of ways that you can basically increase your skills in critical thinking. And it gives you kind of a way to break it up to think about the whole process of critical thinking. And it starts with reasoning would be the first step of how you could become a better critical thinker, and then problem solving. And then it goes to decision making. And then basically what you'll see on the outside of the pyramid is the last step in critical thinking is thinking about your thinking. So it's kind of a process. Some people are good at some parts of the critical thinking, but maybe they fall short in some other areas just because they don't think along those lines. It's not something that they're used to doing necessarily. And so the book kind of really puts things into perspective of ways that you can try to build your skills at critical thinking, because it is a very important skill for the college setting. And also, in your future job positions, you need to have good critical thinking skills. And as you're reading, it's going to basically, it gives you the pyramid structure, but then it goes into depth about each section of the pyramid. Make sure you understand all of the different sections, because you will see questions on the final that have to do with critical thinking and the different parts of the pyramid, the 4-part model. You're going to see questions about the specific parts. So you're going to have reasoning being at the bottom, and that one has a few areas that it talks about: analyzing arguments, assessing assumptions, and then considering claims. And they do break that down in the chapter as you're reading. So make sure as you're reading, if you're taking notes or whatever, take down some of that important information for you to review later when it comes time for the final. And then what you're going to find, the first exercise that we're going to do for chapter 5 has to do with problem solving. And I have this exercise that we do for this chapter. It's basically exercise 5.2. What you need to do, obviously you should be reading the whole chapter, but what you need to specifically read in order to be able to better prepare yourself to do exercise 5.2 is read what starts on page 127 at the very bottom. It starts with problem solving, the basic how-tos. And then it has basically a 7-step model of problem solving. read through the 7 steps so you understand what it's talking about, because when you go to do exercise 5.2, you're basically going to do a problem solving for yourself exercise. And what it's asking you to do, and it's basically, it defines the steps as you're doing the reading, but you're going to be doing this chart here where you're going to be doing a 7-step model of problem solving, and you yourself have to think about a problem that you currently have. It could be a problem with one of your classes, like maybe an upcoming test, or maybe there's something else. Maybe there's like a paper that you have due or something like that. It could also be a problem that's something more on a personal lines. Like maybe I've had some students sometimes say things like, like a problem that they have is they're trying to save up for a car, but they're short of money and it's hard for them to save for it. And so they're basically defining a problem that they currently have, whether it's something with school or it's something at home. Bear in mind some personal things that are going on. I don't necessarily need to know the problem solving steps of very personal things going on, even though, yes, it could be a problem in your life. But think of something that, is a general problem that you're having, whether it's over some sort of, academic thing, or whether it's something that's kind of more in a personal life, like with, money saving or something else, or maybe somebody's trying to save up to buy a house, or it could be anything really. But think of a problem, something, and try to think of something that's actually going to be useful for you to do this 7-step problem solving, that you could potentially analyze a way to solve the problem. And a lot of times some students, they don't really go into depth with this exercise, and they try to make it too basic, and you need to try to kind of really reflect on the different steps, starting with, first of all, defining a problem that you have, whatever it is that you want to basically do for this exercise. And then as you're going through the step process, you need to just kind of elaborate a little bit, so that way you're really reflecting on and thinking about ways that you could potentially get to a point that you could solve the problem. Now, bear in mind that step 7, where it says implement the solution and evaluate the results, it may very well be a problem that you've had in the past that you're using, and you may have already kind of implemented something and then you have evaluated how it worked out for you. That's okay. But if you're thinking of a current problem that you haven't yet had time to do all of the steps, you can basically plan out all of the steps for your problem solving. But for number 7, you may not yet have implemented the solution and been able to evaluate the results. So you could mention that if it's something that you haven't quite gotten to that point where you could actually implement your solution to the problem and then actually evaluate the results. But you could mention something about, like, when I do implement this solution, these are some of the things that I'm going to think about as far as evaluating how it went for me. So just try to elaborate the best that you can for that exercise, and really use it to your advantage to try to kind of figure out a way to step-by-step solve some problem that you're having. And then moving on in the reading from there, it goes into a couple more parts of the pyramid before you get to the section where we're going to be talking more about creative thinking. So when you get to page 132, you're kind of at the very end of the critical thinking section, and it has the last basically section of critical thinking has a good little topic area that you should really kind of read and look over it, because it's talking about becoming a better critical thinker. So some of you may, go, okay, I'm pretty good at critical thinking, but this is a good section of just pointers that you need to think about. And if you really want to be better at critical thinking, these are some of the things that you can do. For example, like number 1, admit when you don't know something. I'm sure all of us have come across someone that maybe that they're wrong about something, but they won't admit it. They just, will keep trying to say that they know whatever it is that they're talking about, and they keep kind of going down that line, and they won't just admit, okay, I don't know the answer, but they're trying to tell you that they know the answer. And it's always better just to admit that you don't know. That's something that I had to learn how to do, especially when I became a professor, a teacher. I had to admit that, okay, sometimes a student will bring up something and I don't know the answer to it. And it's not fun to not know the answer, because you would like to feel like you could tell someone the answer to something. But I really had to learn to just take a step back and go, okay, I don't know the answer. But what I tried to do basically for me is I would just make it a point to find the answer for the person and just admit I don't know, and I'm going to try to find out for you. And that was something that I had to learn how to do. And, the other one's like realize that you have buttons that can be pushed, because sometimes people are good critical thinkers, but maybe there's a topic that's something that really, makes your blood boil or something like that. There's a topic that you get really passionate about. And there are people that know how to push your buttons, and they can basically take you from being a critical thinker to just, blowing up and no longer being able to be a critical thinker because it's on a topic that you feel really strongly about. So you have to realize that, you do have buttons that can be pushed, and you have to be aware of that. And that will help you from getting to that point where maybe you aren't going to be thinking critically anymore when you're having a conversation with someone about a topic that you're more passionate about. And then the third one is like learn more about the opposition, because maybe you don't think the same way as somebody else, but it's always valuable to learn more about why is it that they think that way and try to understand where they're coming from, because it's going to make you overall be a better critical thinker. And then the fourth one is trust and verify. You should always verify information. You shouldn't just take everyone at their word. You should verify the information and make sure that what they are saying is actually factual, or at least valid. And then number 5 is remember that critical thinking is the foundation of all academic achievement. And so read through that section because it has a little more detail there, but those are kind of those 5 pointers that they have about how you can become a better critical thinker. And they're not difficult. They're things that everybody can attain if they want to become a better critical thinker. And then the section pretty much from there is going on to creative thinking. And this is just kind of a good section for you to really read, especially if you tend to think that you aren't a creative thinker. It has a lot of good information there. And then what you do need to focus on for the section about creative thinking, it starts on the bottom of page 134, and there's a section that says 10 ways to become a more creative thinker. And you're going to see it's got it, numbered, the 10 different ways to become a better creative thinker. Read through those because the next exercise that you're going to do is based off of these suggestions that the book has about how to become a better creative thinker. Read through those 10, and then what you're going to see on page 136, it's figure 5.4. It is more of like a chart you'll see there. Read through that chart. It's called 8 Easy Ways to Boost Your Creativity, and you're going to use information from that chart. But some students sometimes choose to use something from the 10 ways to become a more creative thinker as well when they are doing the last exercise for chapter 5. And so let me minimize this real quick. See where it puts me over here. Let me pop myself over here. So you're going to see here, chapter 5, creative thinking. It's going to be a discussion post. I'm going to go ahead and click on it for you just so you can see it. And you're going to use the information there. I think on here, I put specifically to read over the 8 easy ways to boost your creativity, which is figure 5.4, in order to answer this. So you're going to start it just like you do any of the other discussion posts. You're going to hit reply, and then you're going to basically, here is your objective of what you're going to want to do for this creative thinking exercise. And then use this information from this chart, the 8 easy ways to boost your creativity. But you can also supplement it if you want to discuss something that's on the 10 ways to become a more creative thinker that's in the actual chapter. You can supplement your answer with that as well, but try to use this chart, this figure 5.4, to answer this question for the creative thinking exercise that you have for this chapter. And basically, that is it for the chapter. I didn't elaborate a lot and go into a lot of detail, but I wanted to point out the specific areas of the chapter that you do need to focus on because you'll have questions about that on the final. Definitely make sure you are aware of the 10 ways to become a more creative thinker, because you will likely see a question on the final about that creative thinking section. And then basically, if you have any questions about any of the exercises or anything for this week, just let me know. But like I said, it's a super short chapter. It's a short read, and the 2 exercises are both kind of good and they're useful. The problem solving one, because you can actually use it to think about and problem solve on a current problem that you have. And then this exercise over creative thinking is just kind of asking you to think outside the box, take some of these examples from that figure 5.4, and then answer these questions here that you see on this exercise as a discussion post. All right, well, if you have any questions, let me know. Short week, short chapter, and that is it. And I will see you all next time.